in to the destruction of the 3 World Trade Center towers in New York City on September 11, 2001, and a whole lot more. This is 9/11 Freefall. I'm Bernie Suarez, and I'm here with Andy Steele, and we're coming to you on shortwave radio, courtesy WWCR. Hi, everybody. Welcome to 9/11 Freefall, the radio show. This is a program which is committed to the scientific evidence surrounding the events of 9/11. This is also committed to exposing the official story narrative of 9/11, and it is committed, the show is, to bringing attention to architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, a nonprofit organization dedicated to the pursuit of academic truth with respect to the events of 9/11. Andy Steele, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm good, Bernie, and I just want to remind our audience, it's called a show, and whenever you say the word show, people think entertainment, but there's nothing entertaining about this subject. This is a fight that we are all involved in. We're involved in it once a week, not only once a week, but all of the time, and so are you. This is a fight for America as we expose the scientific truth about what really happened on September 11th.
Absolutely. I get entertained when I study science. In some ways, I guess I'm guilty of being entertained by how amazing the truth is and how ridiculous the official story is. So I'm probably guilty of that, Andy. We want to mention to people, architects and engineers, we do it all the time. For those of us that have joined us for the first time, welcome to the show. We talk a lot about architects and engineers and the truth about the science of 9/11 and some surrounding issues, as we did last week, Andy. We talked a little bit about July 4th and things like that, and the mindset of American military and the ramifications of the post 9/11 world and all that. But back on regarding architects and engineers, people, please feel free to go to AE911Truth WHO. That's the main site, and there's a lot of, I've said this many times, a lot of ordinary, hardworking people who have committed a part of their life to helping this mission of getting the 9/11 truth message out to the general public. You want to tell us a little bit about architects and engineers?
Well, currently it's over 1,700 architects and engineers who have signed a petition demanding a real investigation of what brought down the Twin Towers and World Trade Center 7 on September 11th. And, my most overused line, because it's true, if you have two eyes and common sense, you can tell that fire didn't bring those buildings down. And we have thousands upon thousands of other supporters like myself who have signed the petition, and we are going to be talking about in the coming weeks and in the coming months some of our top activists are going to be coming on the show. We've already had Wayne Cost on here. We've had Dave Schlesinger, who head of the public outreach team, also does work on his own with JenningsMystery.com, what he talked about last week. So we're going to be featuring these great individuals, and you can be one of them. And it's not about getting your name out in print or your name on the radio. It's about, telling to your grandchildren in the future, what did you do when 9/11 Truth was being exposed? What did you do in the great fight for America's soul? Because that's what this is. It's a truth. It's an ugly truth, but in the same sense, the fact that so many people are coming together, answering the call, that's a beautiful thing. And we can go into the future with a clear conscience, knowing that we did everything we could to expose this. All right, so if you go to AE911Truth.org, there's a gray volunteer button on the left-hand side of the page. Okay. From there, you can volunteer, and you can sign up with the team and join this fight.
That's right, yeah. So everyone can do that. And, more importantly, at this point, maybe we have people listening in or not sure about this. Maybe this is the first time they're hearing about the scientific evidence. And to those individuals out there, you go to the website, AE911Truth.org, click on the evidence button. There's a button at the top that says evidence. Check it out and get in there, get involved, and read on the evidence of 9/11 truth and what architects and engineers stands for. A lot to go over there on that. So, we have a lot of other things, and we'll get into that a little more later. Architects and engineers, we just got wrapped up a little over a week ago with Experts Speak Out. National tour is the 9/11 Explosive Evidence Experts Speak Out. We've been talking a lot about the documentary that was released by architects and engineers just about a month and a half, 2 months ago now, and the film did premiere throughout the country. It was an exciting event. hopefully we'll get Richard Gage on to talk about the event and what he observed and what he learned, and tell us about those cities. It was over 30 cities, a 30-city tour on that. So anything new on that?
Yeah, it wrapped up this week, and I watched the webcast. You know, I live in New York State, so it's hard for me to get over to the West Coast. And but I watched the webcast late at night, and it came off very well. You know, Richard was giving his presentation, and it was like it was almost like a Emmy Award or night. You know, everybody was dressed up. Or better yet, rather, it would be like a movie debut, and that's really what this was. It was a movie, but it's not an entertainment movie. You know, this is a movie that everyone needs to see because it's what I say the 9/11 Omission Commission should have been, or NIST. You know, they should have interviewed these people. And they should have had their expertise. They should be the ones working at NIST instead of the people who are there now, the people who gave us that ridiculous report. You know, so everyone needs to see this, and you can purchase this. We have the information we're going to be giving you on how you can purchase the DVD, and you can show it at your local libraries. You can show it to your friends. I always tell my friends when I give them a free DVD, you know, the price for this is that you got to show it to one other person, and they always do it. You know, because then they add that kind of extra degree of specialness, and get it out there, you know. And this, you know, right now when you burn a DVD, it's kind of like the Gutenberg Bible of the modern times in terms of just spreading information, viral information. So, you know, you can be part of history by getting that out there and joining this enormous effort.
And for those of you who do go to the website, go ahead and on the homepage there's a banner on the left-hand side that says 9/11 Explosive Evidence Expert Speak Out, and it is a banner, rectangular banner on the left-hand side. Go ahead and click on that, and that'll take you straight to the 9/11expertspeakout.org. So, and on that page is where individuals can click at the link in the top that says "Watch it now" and get the DVD. Lots of other options there to watch the trailer and a few other things there. So we want to mention that. Well, that was a very, very successful tour, and a lot of volunteers are hopeful to get the film into other platforms. So if you're a listener and you support this film and you want to bring it into your hometown and have a presentation, let us know. Send us an email. There's a contact button on the AE911Truth.org website, and just put the title of what you're looking for. Say if you want to set up a presentation where you live or whatever, just let us know about that, and we'll be a part of the solution, and we'll get this video presentation out there. I'll do everything we can to help you out with that.
11 years after 9/11, experts are speaking out about what really destroyed the Twin Towers and Building 7.
They're talking about a single columnar collapse or failure that resulted in a total collapse of the building.
Building number 7 descended in free fall for the first 100 feet, which means that there was absolutely no resistance to the descent whatsoever.
So all of the columns really needed to be severed at the same time.
The symmetry is the smoking gun.
NIST has admitted it went into free fall for 8 stories.
You don't need to be an engineer or an architect to see what happened to those buildings.
Dit is controlled demolition. Zeker weten. Zeker weten.
What I saw, it was a classic implosion. The center of the core, the penthouse area, starts to move first, and then the building follows along with it.
NIST excluded the document from FEMA in Appendix C that documented the evidence of melting steel.
More than 1,500 architects and engineers and 12,000 others, including many scientists, have signed the petition calling for a scientific investigation of the destruction of the Twin Towers and World Trade Center Building 7. The report, issued by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, referred to as NIST, was not valid science.
To purchase 9/11 Explosive Evidence Experts Speak Out, go to 911expertspeakout.org.
All right. Well, Andy, we did a few things. One of the things we like to go over, we kind of recapped a little bit, and I know you helped me out already there, talking a little bit about what we did last week and what we talked about. And for our audience who wasn't able to tune in, last week we had one of our volunteers, Dave Schlesinger, who talked about a lot of things, but the focus was on one of his efforts. Now, Dave Schlesinger is an amazing volunteer. He works hard, does a lot of things for within architects and engineers. He's been a social activist for a long time. We focused on one effort. We talked a lot about Barry Jennings, who's a critical key eyewitness in the story of the 9/11 event, and he was standing in Building 7 and heard all types of explosions. So he was interviewed by Dylan Avery, I believe, from the Loose Change production, and gave a long interview, which can be seen at JenningsMystery.com. So JenningsMystery.com, you can see that, and that site was put together by Dave Schlesinger, and along with it came this campaign for banner making and having individuals with banners on different parts of the country, simply getting the story out there, the Jennings mystery, and getting people out there to learn about what happened to Barry Jennings, a critical eyewitness guy. And of course, unfortunately, we did lose him. He did pass away mysteriously. So, and then we also talked about last week with regards to July 4th and this whole thing, defending America, and the military mind of the young men in this country. A lot of military individuals in our country, and this notion of defending America versus giving up our freedoms, and that whole disconnect that exists with regards to the truth of what happened on 9/11 and how that ties into essentially all the wars that are going on. And without understanding and appreciating this truth of 9/11, that it didn't happen as the official story tells us, how can one understand the context of a July 4th celebration? And a lot of individuals that we talked about celebrating the wars and labeling these men as heroes for no other reason than they're simply defending America. And obviously, we do need a lot of help to get this information out there to everyone, because I believe that 9/11 Truth is the greatest anti-war message that could possibly exist, considering that it seems that all the wars that are going on all stem from 9/11, the event.
Well, you're absolutely right about that, Bernie. And I always say this to people, is that if you're anti-war, if you're anti the loss of civil liberties, then you need to be pro 9/11 Truth, because this is the issue that pulls the rug out from under all of those things, that brings this whole empire crashing to the ground. And when I say empire, I don't talk about the United States. I don't talk about the U.S. Constitution. I don't talk about the great things we were taught as kids America stands for and that I still believe in. I'm talking about the empire that has imprisoned those things. That falls away with 9/11 Truth.
Absolutely. It's very difficult to associate what's happening, what has happened the last 10, 11 years in this country with the events of 9/11. And this seems to be one connection after another. Everything seemed to have been started and born out of this event, the conclusions that were made in this event. So for those of you out there, you're wondering about this show and saying, we missed out? Well, you didn't miss out, because if you go to 911freefall.com, you can go ahead and look for look for a show that you did not catch, and then click the play button, and you'll just hear it from there. And that's where everyone can go. Again, that's 911freefall.com. If you missed a show, it's not over. You can just click and go ahead and listen to one of our shows there, and people can listen in. And among other things, Andy, people can listen in to Barry Jennings and Scott Forbes' first-hand testimonies, and those sound bites are so powerful. We talked about it a few weeks ago, and you can't say enough. These one coincidence after another, and these coincidences are just incredible, and at some point we need to take a stand and examine these coincidences a little more, and a lot of people have done that, thankfully, and that is what the 9/11 Truth movement is all about. Okay, well, this week we're going to get into a couple other things, and we're going to pose some questions like we did last week, and we are going to hit some other topics, but first we're going to have a 10-second moment of silence to remember the victims themselves and their family member. Okay, so, Andy, I know we had, what do we have? We posed some questions the last couple of weeks, and we had talked about simple questions. Do you understand the importance of applying the scientific method? What we need to do is we asked anybody who wants to answer that, just put the name of the radio show in the subject column and shoot out an email to AE911Truth at the contact button until we get ourselves all situated with a nice little email for everybody. And send an answer. Let us know what you think. We also have this program on YouTube and on the internet, and it is on 911freefall.com. So get us an answer, or just, as Andy said last week, you don't have to send us an answer. Think out for yourself. And the other question was, should the U.S. government or any government be exempt from having to apply the scientific method? At AE911Truth.org, there's a button, and it's called the FAQ button. And if individuals can click on that, we selected a couple of questions that we're going to read out, and we're going to go over some of the answers here. And this week, we're going to go over questions number 1 and question number 6. Again, that's AE911Truth.org, and you click on the FAQ tab at the top. And Architects and Engineers has put together a list of frequently asked questions with some short answers and a more detailed answer. So that's one of the things we want to do this week, and we'll talk about it. So the first question in the FAQ page, we're going to go to question number 1, and the question is, who demolished the Twin Towers and Building 7, and why? Well, that's a pretty fair question right there, wouldn't you say, Andy?
Well, it's one you certainly ask once you learn the truth about what really brought down the building. It's like a parent when they come across a mess and they've got a house full of kids. You want to know who did this. And, of course, we as a nation, on a more serious note, with this major crime, we want to know who did it. So, I mean, that's a very fair question.
And it's straightforward, and it made it to number 1. So I'm not sure if that's how the order of these questions, if they are in terms of frequency. I'm not sure that that's the case, but it is number 1, and I like it. It's a good question. I singled it out for this week. So the question reads, as we said it already, who demolished the Twin Towers and Building 7 and why? And the short answer, we're going to go over a short answer and a more detailed answer. The short answer is, we do not know who the perpetrators of this crime are. Identifying the culprits is the purpose of a real criminal investigation. However, we are able to provide overwhelming evidence of a cover-up of this crime. In addition, scientific forensic evidence indicates that only individuals who could gain long-term access into the highly secure World Trade Center skyscrapers and obtain advanced thermitic materials could have orchestrated the destruction of the Twin Towers and Building 7. Anything you want to add to that, Andy?
Well, absolutely. And, it's kind of a complex question. Now, when I talked earlier, I said it's a very normal response when you learn about this information to ask, who did this? Because you want to know who committed this crime. Now, Architects and Engineers for 911Truth itself is an organization of researchers. Now, and even though it's a fair question, it's also a question that's used to try to attack the scientific truth. And let me go explain that into a little bit more further detail. Years ago, a common technique of pundits would be to attack anyone that's pointing out the obvious evidence of controlled demolition in this case, is to ask them to explain the entire conspiracy, quote-unquote, right then and there, to lay it out for them. Who did it? How did they did it? How did they get in there? What's their names? What's their middle name? What's their social security number? Now, I'm making a joke to some extent, but this is the kind of thing that they asked them to do. They wanted them to lay out the entire crime as if we know. And what I ask the audience to do is imagine now that you have a situation where you have you find a person has passed away, right? And it gets ruled that they took their own life, that it was a suicide, right? But then you come across evidence that points out that it obviously was not a suicide, that this person had been murdered. All right, it's just very obvious evidence. It's out there. People missed it, but now you know it. Now, you may have no idea who did it, how the person got into the house, But you have pointed out that it's an obvious murder. So right from there, you know that you have more of an investigation to do, that it's not a done deal, that you have to go out and find out that information. Well, we, at Architects and Engineers for 911Truth have pointed out now that, this is not just a collapse, that the pile driver theory doesn't make sense, that this had to be a controlled demolition. Now, who did it, how they got into the buildings, there's a wide range of opinions and very educated opinions on who it may have been. And I have my own opinions on that. Bernie, I'm sure, has his own opinions on that. We don't really get into that in the show. It might bleed through our words and to some extent because we're human, but the organization itself just focuses on that science. From that science, you have to go do a real investigation to find out who the culprits are. So, to demand that we have to lay out, that whoever is bringing this evidence has to lay out the plan from step 1 to step 115, or however many steps it took, is basically just a diversionary tactic.
Absolutely.
It overlooks the obvious evidence that, hey, it was a controlled demolition. Now it's the government's job, it's the American citizens' job to find out who it was and how they did it.
Absolutely. It's a diversion I can think of, that reminds me, as you were saying, I had a situation one time, I was out tabling with 911Truth out in the streets one time, and I had an individual who had been known to attack the truth, the tablings all the time, and this guy, I won't even say where it is, but he came over to us one day and he saw me, and I had never had a chance to confront this individual in terms of at least pointing him to the truth of the science, and which is most of the information on our table. It's all a bunch of architects and engineer flyers and all. And the individual approached me and immediately talked about the diversion. I don't remember his exact question to me, but it was something to the effect of, are you saying that bin Laden didn't do it? I'm sure a lot of us have heard that question. So how do you say, or are you claiming that bin Laden didn't do it? And to which I responded to him, say, are you aware of any controlled demolition companies that bin Laden was the head of? And the guy gave me this blank stare and walked away.
Well, you threw him for a loop, it sounds like. I got my own story to share, too. This was around last year when I was, when AE911Truth was doing demonstrations around the country in front of federal buildings. I had done it the year before, and I did it this year again. I was going to do it, but the federal building added a new rule that you have to get permission from the head of the federal building to do it. Now, that's a questionable rule, but I played along. So I go up into the building, I go up to the head of security and the building manager. I'm filling out the form, and they ask me what organization I represent. Now, you got to understand, I'm sitting in the main office here with a guy in a uniform. I've got the president's portrait staring down at me from above their desk. I really don't want a lot of trouble. I just want to, I just want to get set up for my demonstration the next day with, that I'm going to do. So all I said is, I represent an organization that has proven that the Twin Towers and World Trade Center 7 were brought down with controlled demolition. And you can see they kind of looked at each other, and I said, yeah, we got to figure out how terrorists got these bombs in that building. And it was kind of funny. It was like, I said that jokingly, but left it at that.
Well, and absolutely, there's no doubt. And it's amazing, and this is what we're dealing with. So I did want to read out, there is another answer to that question. Now, again, for those of you who are just tuned in, we're answering one of the frequently asked questions at Architects and Engineers for 911Truth, and that question was, who demolished the Twin Towers and Building 7 and why? So the longer answer, the more detailed answer, and I'll just read part of it, obviously, it reads like this. It says, in order to determine who planned, financed, and carried out the controlled demolition of the World Trade Center towers, a fully resourced, unimpeachable investigation with subpoena power is required. Just as in any criminal matter, the perpetrators should be charged, tried, and convicted in a court of law before valid judgment can be made about guilt. Then Architects and Engineers puts out the statement, we at Architects and AE911Truth.org are technical and building professionals. Again, this is with respect to the actual professionals who volunteer at Architects and Engineers. It says, we do not speculate about who may have been responsible for destroying these buildings. However, we do point to overwhelming evidence of a cover-up of the crime. The National Institute of Standards and Technology, known as NIST, was tasked by Congress to uncover how the three skyscrapers, quote-unquote, collapsed. The World Trade Center reports that they provided in order to prop up the impossible hypothesis of collapse by fire were fraudulent. This fraud is exposed in our original documentary, 9/11 Blueprint for Truth, and will be further exposed in mid-January when the powerful final edition of our latest milestone DVD, 9/11 Explosive Evidence Experts Speak Out, is released. Of course, our audience knows that production has already been released. Obviously, this was written last year. Now, I'll read this last part. The topic of the motives behind the demolitions raises non-technical questions that are outside of our expertise and the scope of our examination. While we know that the World Trade Center catastrophe has been used as justification to launch wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and curtail civil liberties, it is up to criminal investigators, not architects and engineers, to identify motives. And I'll just end right there. And reading this, Andy, I'm reminded that this that I'm reading is a direct representation of the view of architects and engineers. This show, 9/11 Freefall, does not necessarily, aside from the actual scientific evidence, we want to remind our audience that this show, otherwise, in terms of the opinions expressed on the show, are not direct representations of AE911 Truth. So good time to throw that in, as opposed to what I just read, which are direct representation of the organization. Of course, the science of 9/11 notwithstanding. So definitely, again, people have to, that is well said. And if anybody wants to read the rest of this explanation, please, again, go to AE911Truth.org and click on FAQ and go ahead and read the first FAQ number 1. And then there's a button that says detailed explanation. Go ahead and click on that, and you can read the rest of this. So, well, it's well said. The architects and engineers, in terms of the criminal component of this investigation, I've said it before, I see architects and engineers as nothing more than the forensics department that just deals with that physical evidence. Every case, especially murder cases and cases where people die, or any criminal case that has forensic evidence and physical evidence, has to be treated just as that. And these departments are separate, and architects and engineers is essentially that forensics department dealing with this evidence.
Put in simpler terms, you don't go to the foot doctor to talk about a rash on your back. And if you look at that FAQ rather, and click on it, you'll see at the end of the article they give some general referrals to other sites that look into the culpability and things like that. And that's not even necessarily an endorsement; it's just a direction where you can point. But you got to do your own research if you're interested in those areas. But the most important thing is the fact that it was a controlled demolition, that we were lied to about the cause of why these buildings came down, and from that basis, everything else follows.
Absolutely, and I guess I won't go to the foot doctor for anything other than a foot. I love your analogies. By the way, I keep still picturing the person at the airport trying to squeeze that gigantic teddy bear into the suitcase. For some reason, I can't get that picture out of my mind. So I do appreciate your analysis and your examples there. Okay, well, what do we have? We wanted to get into another question. It's the frequently asked question, the FAQ number 6. And this one, I know it deals with some issues I know you want to talk about and you deal with a lot. So we'll get right to it. It reads like this. It says, why does AE911 Truth represent only a small percentage of architects and engineers?
I don't want to take some of your words out of your mouth, but the first sentence says most architects and engineers have never been presented with the scientific evidence of controlled demolition. So I've seen this. I've seen people say, only there's so many millions of architects in the United States, and only 1,700 is not a lot. But that's assuming that they've been presented the information and assuming that they've actually looked at it and studied it. We got to remember that in this world, this is a busy world, and especially for people who are architects and engineers that are living their lives, to assume that they have all been equally presented this information and have all digested it and come up with a conclusion is ludicrous. And, the 1,700 architects and engineers, when you fill out that petition, it's a process. Like Wayne Cost was talking about many weeks ago when we interviewed him. It's a process to do it because we actually verify that somebody is who they say they is. Otherwise, somebody who, attack research will try to sign up as an architect, and they may not be an architect, just to test the system. But we have a verifications team that goes through all of that whole process. And Wayne actually thought he had finished it and didn't finish it when he was doing that. Okay, so it's a process to do it, and it's not something that that you're going to immediately just sign up for. As if like you want to get more information about a Florida vacation, you give your name and email address and have brochures sent to you. It's something that you're going to research. And just like Wayne was talking about his controlled demolitionometer, he went about it very scientifically, just like a real science professional would. He looked into it for years. He discussed it with peers, and he came to that conclusion, that unfortunate conclusion, that this was controlled demolition. So you have to look at how many people have gotten this information and had it presented to them.
Absolutely, and I love that phrase you used, the controlled demolitionometer. Hopefully I'm saying that right. Well, maybe we can install some of those controlled demolitionometers into other people's minds just by sharing this information with them. And then get those old controlled demolitionometers buzzing and going off to the right there. All right, well said. And the way this reads, and you kind of said it already, Andy, and the first sentence of the explanation is, most architects and engineers have never been presented with the scientific evidence of controlled demolition. That's one. And then it goes on, in addition, most of those who take the time to examine the evidence acknowledge that the official story can't be true. As of the date of this publication, there are almost 1,700 architects and engineers. I'll stop right there and say, everybody, today it's 1,702 architects and engineers who have openly supported, let me read back, the architects who have openly supported the findings of AE911Truth versus only a few dozens who have openly supported the NIST World Trade Center reports. Even so, in the end, the evidence stands on its own, regardless of who or regardless of how many professionals are aware of it. Let's be careful to assume that numbers equals facts, right?
Exactly. I say this to the audience, break the mind control. We make a movie called Explosive Evidence, Experts Speak Out, and we have our stream of experts because that is important to have people with authority and to present the case. But what's more important is to look at your own eyes, look at your own, use your own reasoning, and look at WTC7 and ask yourself if fire really brought down that building. And there's a video on YouTube, and I challenge everyone to go out on YouTube and type in 9/11, this is an orange. And it makes a great case of what I'm talking about right now.
Repeat that again? 9/11?
It's called, the actual video title is called This is an Orange. It'll get you there quicker if you add the word 9/11 to to what I'm talking about. But the basic argument in this video, they present an orange. They have an orange sitting on the table, and it says the word orange under it. And then they go on to talk about controlled demolitions, and they show examples of acknowledged controlled demolitions. And then it shows World Trade Center 7 falling, and it talks about how the official explanation is fire. And then they challenge you to use your own common sense, and they say, do you believe your own eyes, or do you believe what you're told? And then they show the orange again at the end, but they put the word apple under it. So you see that it's an orange, but if somebody's telling you that it's an apple, does that actually make it an apple? So you have to use your own common sense. Now, the experts and the numbers, we're getting more and more architects and engineers all the time signed on, but the most important thing, like this article says, is the evidence speaks for itself. Use your own common sense. Break the mind control and speak for yourself, and speak it loudly.
Absolutely. Again, for those of you listening in, we're going over frequently asked question number 6 from AE911Truth.org, the FAQ page. The question number 6 reads, why does AE911Truth represent only a small percentage of architects and engineers? And we are answering that. And so I wanted to, the more detailed answer, I'm going to read part of that. It reads as such. It says, those who raise this point often do so in an attempt to avoid dealing with the scientific evidence brought forth by AE911Truth. The real question should be, is the evidence that they are bringing forth factual and worthy of a real investigation? To that question, the answer is yes. It doesn't matter whether there is one architect and one engineer, or 12 or 100 or 1,600 or 16,000. Those who question the premises offered because the number of adherents in those premises is deemed too small are engaging in a logical fallacy often referred to as appeal to majority. And that's a fallacy. And there's definitely a guideline here for avoiding just simply joining the chorus just based on numbers here.
Well, exactly. And I asked the audience, does the Earth revolve around the sun, or does the sun revolve around the Earth? You know, hundreds of years ago, the people believed that the sun revolved around the Earth. This was the majority opinion, and people who challenged that were literally persecuted for doing so. But now, hundreds of years later, we've been in space. We've pointed our satellites. We've done new research, and we know that the opposite is true. So, the majority opinion, the majority can be wrong as well. And, and again, this is not even talking about the majority opinion, because a lot of people have not even examined this evidence or weighed in on it. So, what you have is you have a smaller minority speaking for the majority and telling you that this is the expert opinion, this is the official story. But that's all it is. It's just mind control. It's telling you what you think. Like I said before, you need to think for yourself.
How about the 9/11 Commission, which was tasked with giving us the fullest explanation? No, not one sentence in the 571 pages of the 9/11 Commission report even mentions the destruction of World Trade Center 7. Is this one of the reasons, perhaps, that Senator Max Cleland resigns from the commission, citing it's a national scandal? The investigation is compromised. How about expert corroboration? How about Danny Jawenko, 27-year controlled demolitions expert? It starts from below. They've simply blown away the columns. It's controlled demolition. A team of experts did this. It's professional work, without a doubt. How about Hugo Bachmann, Professor Emeritus, Chairman, Department of Structural Dynamics at Earthquake Engineering, Swiss Federal Institute of Technology? In my opinion, the building, World Trade Center 7, was with great probability professionally demolished. Here's a floor plan of Building 7. Now, to bring a building smoothly, symmetrically into its own footprint without falling over, what we have to do is remove the core columns, because what we want to do is bring the outside of the building in on itself. Now, this involves a high degree of precision that fire is not capable of, being an organic process.
I wanted to talk, we're talking about these scientific issues. And for our audience, it's worth it to go backwards a little bit. And we really haven't spoken much about the pile driver theory. For those of you that are listening, the official story is grounded. It is based on a theory called the pile driver theory. We've mentioned this before, and what this theory says, and there are several people out there that are preaching this. They go out of their way to get this natural collapse theory to people, and one individual, his name is Dave Thomas, and another individual out there is Chris Moore. There's a lot of others out there that are clinging on to this, and all of the claims of the official story with regards to the collapse of the World Trade Center is based on the pile driver theory. Now, the reason that I am bringing this up again, Andy, is because my experience is kind of like World Trade Center 7. If you talk to people in the streets, most people have never even heard of the pile driver theory, and the pile driver theory is what their entire lives are based on. People are going to war because of the pile driver theory. People are losing their sons and daughters in wars, and all the things that are happening in the world can be traced, in my opinion, back to the pile driver theory. Now, the pile driver theory, for those who haven't heard us talk about it or have not researched this on their own, it is the theory that explains how the towers came down in New York City. It's based on the theory that somehow the building was using one of the examples of the North or the South Tower, for example, that somehow due to fires from the planes, that the building essentially sawed off at some point, and this section of the top, this smaller section of the top, fell on the lower section and simply crushed its way to the bottom like a hammer going through solid concrete and cement and steel beams, just simply hammering its way to the bottom just on the force of gravitational collapse. So that is the pile driver theory. It means that if one of the things that we do, Andy, at the street level is we cut out a 4x4 block and we cut it in two. One piece is longer than the other. The shorter piece represents the top part of the World Trade Center, and the longer piece represents the bottom core solid foundation. And we try to show people that in the pile driver theory, the claim is simply that this smaller block destroyed the bigger block. And well, that violates every principle of Newton's laws.
Well, you're absolutely right, Bernie. And, my first question is, what happened to this block as it goes down? Because according to this theory, I should have a block sitting on a heap of rubble at the top, almost like a toothpaste cap or something. And, I don't see that. I see the block disintegrating before it hits the ground. Look into all your old news files. Look into all of the pictures from that day. Where do you see a top to the World Trade Center sitting on a pile of rubble at the bottom, like a king on the mountain?
Unbelievable. Absolutely. And, well, Andy, maybe I'll get in trouble for this, but I'm going to do one of my things, and I sort of do this playfully, but this is serious, in some ways, and in some ways, I have for many years, I'll just playfully offer a cash reward to people for things that I know they're never going to be able to find, and so I'm never going to have to be out of the cash. So here it is. I'm doing it, Andy. I'm going out on a limb here, so I'm going to do one of my cash rewards. Anybody listening here can find evidence that the top part of the World Trade Center, if you can find that block and show me where it is, find me a video that shows the upper block hammering the lower block, I'll send you some cash. Should we say the amount? No, we don't know. We put any amount of dollars on that. I offer cash reward for anybody who can find that top block. That does not exist, people. When you look at the video, that top block is pulverized, and it certainly there's nothing left, as you just pointed out. When the destruction is done, there's nothing left. It's pulverized, and if things are pulverized, then it can't act as weight, as it is pulverized, and it cannot break the resistance that is of the lower floors. And we're going to, if we have time, we're going to talk a little bit about Newton's laws. I tend to slow things down, don't I talking about the scientific method one time and all these National Construction Safety Team Act and all these kinds of things. But we do this for a reason. We want people to understand the very basics of 9/11 truth. It is not based on conspiracies. It is not based on stories, sea stories, and all this. Now, there's a lot to the story, and we know, but right now we're just focusing on the science, and there's a lot of fun that we can have with the science just talking about it, because this stuff is so basic, and those that claim the progressive collapse and this whole gravitational collapse theories, they just simply get around these basic scientific principles. So I want to remind our audience that that is what the official story is based on. It's called, write this down, people, pile driver theory. That's the problem, and we'll be talking more about that later again, and as we go on with this show. With regard to the science of 9/11, I want to mention a couple of websites, a couple of YouTube channels that are priceless. These individuals have given their lives to really put this information together, and it's priceless. And we ask that everyone, you want to see demonstrations of Newton's laws, and you want to see the application of the science to 9/11 truth, go ahead and go to David Chandler's channel, and that channel is David Chandler, CHANDER 911. So David Chandler 911. That channel has some incredible demonstrations. That David Chandler is a physics. I know. I hope I get this right. He's a physics professor. He teaches physics, high school level physics, and he's got quite a bit of experience. He does such a good job of breaking down the simple Newton's laws. Also, I want to mention another YouTube channel that I urge all our listeners to go to, and I believe that's the YouTube channel for Jonathan Cole, and that's Physics and Reason. So spell it all out, Physics and Reason. And that channel is amazing. There's one, he's got so many incredible videos there. One of them that is one of my favorites, I don't know if you have any favorite ones, Andy, but one of my favorite ones is Newton versus NIST.
Well, I haven't seen that video, so you're going to have to send that to me.
Well, let me tell you about a little bit. Let me mention to the audience that these channels are amazing. I've spent a lot of time on them, and there's some incredible videos of Newton versus NIST. But one of the most important things that one has to appreciate the videos that are on these two YouTube channels is one has to have an appreciation for Newton's laws. And I guess I'll go into that a little bit, just because it's so important. Is Newton's laws are described, there's three important laws of motion that Isaac Newton introduced to the world, and these laws have been around for hundreds of years, and these laws don't change. They've been proven over and over again. And what I'm going to do, so for everyone's sake, is just slow it down a little bit and talk about Newton's laws with whatever time we have, and maybe we'll pick this up next week. Newton's laws, there are three laws, and the first one, it reads, an object at rest will remain at rest unless acted upon by an unbalanced force. An object in motion continues in motion with the same speed and in the same direction unless, again, acted upon by an unbalanced force. Now, people, that is rule number one when it comes to Newton's law. I'll read from a passage here. It says, this means that there is a natural tendency of objects to keep on doing whatever they're doing. All objects resist changes in their state of motion. In the absence of an unbalanced force, an object in motion will maintain that state of motion. And that's one of the first things I go over with people when I go over this at the street level. Things are going to remain in their steady state or in motion, and they're not going to really change unless you act on it. If you hit it with something and interfere with whatever is already happening, whether it's moving or not. So that's essentially Newton's first law. And the second law, it reads, acceleration is produced when a force acts on a mass. The greater the mass of the object being accelerated, the greater the amount of force needed. And And what that essentially means is everyone unconsciously, they realize that this is true because, when you pick up something that's heavier, it's going to require more energy to pick that heavy thing up. It's just the way it is. It's that simple, people. That's what Newton's laws is. So that relationship is shown by the formula force equals mass times acceleration, or F equals m times a. And that second law is intended to bring together that relationship. So if you're going to break down a much larger segment of building, as in the World Trade Center, if you're going to break it down and to pulverize it to dust, we're using the smaller chunk of floors from the top portion. That is inconsistent with Newton's laws, because we're going to go into the third law. And it's very simple, people. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. That means if you're going to try to hit the lower parts of the building with a 15-story segment or a 17-story segment or whatever it was, that energy is absolute, and that is X amount of energy that is in that 15-story chunk of building. And now if you're going to hit the lower section, you're going to get back 15 stories of energy pushing right back, and a lot more, because there's a lot more than 15 stories below that. So you might be able to destroy the first 15 stories, but then something else has to provide that energy to start negotiating the additional floors after those first 15. Again, I'm arbitrarily just using 15 stories. I forget what the actual building number was, how many floors there were, 15 or 17 stories or whatever it may be. It could be 20, 15, doesn't matter. If you're going to hit the lower portion of the building with a 15-story chunk of building, you're going to have enough energy to compromise the first 15 at most. But in order to get into the other stories below that and below that and below that, you simply have to come up with energy from somewhere, and gravity cannot provide that energy. You have to have some sort of external energy, or something has to remove the energy, the static energy that's already in that lower section of the building. Andy, you want to comment on that?
Well, I mean, but let's just assume, like Wayne was talking about that cartoon with the guy in front of the blackboard, and he says, and at this point a miracle happens, and the other scientist says, you need to go back, you need to do your research or something like that. Let's just assume that a miracle happens, and that this top part of the building is generating enough energy to bring the other floors down below it, to pile drive it into the ground. Well, where did it go? And I talked about this before, but it's a really important point to stress, is that even if you want to believe that this top part is generating the energy as it comes down to bring down every floor on top of it, well, we should see a big pile driver sitting proudly on the top of this rubble heap. So, and again, you can't have it both ways. You can't have it generating the energy to drive it down, but then disappearing somehow before it hits the ground. So this just goes to show how the government's explanation doesn't make any sense.
Absolutely. You can't have it both ways. You can't hit a building and crush the lower part in a pile driver theory and still have nothing left at the end where everything's pulverized. I mean, if you're crushing the floors, then you're crushing the floors. But how do you pulverize everything on a simple collapse? It may sound easy to you, and it may sound obvious to me, and probably a lot of people listening to us are shaking their heads saying, okay, we can see that. Anybody who has a deep-rooted appreciation for the scientific method, we've talked a lot about that. Don't make me have to talk about the scientific method again. But we will be talking about the scientific method again and again and again. Hopefully we'll hammer our points across. But to some people out there, this stuff does not matter. And I can't believe every time I hear Dave Thomas and individuals like Chris Moore just rolling right along, and they're going around everywhere and having lectures and talking and writing, putting together websites and all this stuff to support the gravitational collapse theory, and ignoring not only Newton's laws, and not only ignoring the scientific method, and not only ignoring the testimonies, but just ignoring all the evidence around them, the most likely hypothesis, the fact that the buildings are built to last, and where is the energy coming from to break through the solid buildings, and where do they get the energy from that? They just claim that it was there, and gravity is providing that energy, and that's impossible. possible. This is not out on a limb. This is simply not possible, people. Gravity cannot provide that extra energy that you need to break through solid energy that's already in place, holding a building together. You just can't do it.
Well, you're right, and also too, if you speak so confidently about an engineering failure allegedly as great as this, where's the historical precedence? There is no historical precedence for a collapse like this with the Twin Towers, and then of course with Building 7 collapsing because of fire. So, these people who they speak confidently, but they have nothing to base it on, because this was the first time in history that something like this had happened, and since it defies Newton's laws and all of the laws of science, it just seems that even if someone wants to believe the official story, a greater analysis of their theory is warranted, just for it to make sense.
And our listeners should realize that nothing that we speak about is secret here. But at the same time, how the computer model science was put together to explain the collapse theory and the pile driver theory, all the studies and experiments are related to that, assuming that there were any studies, data, and experiments related to that, are a secret, and nobody knows where these studies are, because apparently, according to some at the congressional level, they, with the National Construction Safety Team Act, declared that they can subjectively claim that releasing this information would be a jeopardy to security and that kind of stuff. So we are dealing with transparent science versus not so transparent science, and video models just showing fantastic theories of gravitational collapse. That is why, if this sounds ridiculous to you, then you know now why the 9/11 Truth movement exists, and you understand now why we are doing this show, why we're talking about the science of 9/11, why this is going to continue happening, and why we are not going to stop until we have justice. 1,702 architects and engineers have signed that petition demanding a new investigation. I like to call it a true investigation, not so much a new investigation, but a true investigation that'll get to the bottom of this. Till then, we do need to deal with these individuals that are constantly attacking the science, and we want to remind those that appreciate the science that if you agree with anything you're hearing, you probably realize that the science right now as we speak is under attack and has been under attack for quite a while. So we're not just defending 9/11 Truth, we're defending the field of science and the scientific method. So we have a big situation. That's what this is about. We're defending the science because the science is under attack. Help us out, people. If you believe this and you understand what we're saying, come to the site, help us out, help out 9/11 Truth, AE911Truth.org, and support this show. All right, well, Andy, we're going to wrap up. I know we're running up on time, so any last words you want to throw in before we do a wrap?
You got to defend science, you got to defend truth, and you need to be out there and be a part of history and speak out for 9/11 Truth, for the victims and their family members, and help out AE 9/11 Truth and join us.
And that's why we do the moment of silence for only 10 seconds to remember those victims and their families whose lives were changed forever, as were almost all of our lives changed forever. Well, thanks a lot, Andy. It's always fun being here with you and getting this show out for our audience and be able to keep this flowing in a nice way. So for everyone else, again, I'm Bernie Suarez, and I'm here with Andy Steele. This is 9/11 Freefall, the radio show. Again, we want to thank WWCR and have this every Friday nights at 8 o'clock Eastern, and we can't emphasize it enough. We need your help. If this information is new to you, go ahead and go to those websites we talked about. If you know and you are part of the choir and we're preaching to you, and you get out there and spread the word, we love you and we thank you for all your support. Until next time, we want to say goodbye to everyone. Take care, everybody.